Good morning. The Old Testament reading this morning is from Genesis 12, 1-9. The Lord had said to Abram, "Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, his livestock, and all the people he had taken into his household at Haran, and headed to the land of Canaan. There they arrived in Canaan. Abram traveled through the land as far as Shechem. There he set up camp beside the oak of Moreh. At that time, the area was inhabited by Canaanites. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, I will give this land to your descendants. And Abram built an altar there and dedicated it to the Lord who had appeared to him. After that, Abram traveled south and set up camp in the hill country, with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. There he built another altar and dedicated it to the Lord, and he worshiped the Lord. Then Abram continued traveling south by stages toward the Negev. The New Testament reading is from Acts 1, 4-8. Once when he was eating with them, he commanded them, "Do not leave Jerusalem until the Father sends you the gift he promised, as I told you before. John baptized with water, but in just a few days you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit." So when the apostles were with Jesus, they kept asking him, "Lord, has the time come for you to free Israel and restore your kingdom?" He replied, "The Father alone has the authority to set those dates and times, and they are not for you to know. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere, in Jerusalem, throughout Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." This is the word of the Lord for the people of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. A fellow named Blaine Pardo wrote a bunch of humorous mission statements for companies or groups. A mission statement is supposed to make clear what a company or group does. Whether it reflects on whatever really goes on there is always questionable. Here are a few real-life mission statements that Pardo wrote. We innovate, collaborate, create, vacillate, procrastinate, pontificate, deliberate, guesstimate, and under-deliver daily to our clientele. Here's another one. We are experts at claiming to be experts. And lastly, my favorite, imagine this actually being a company's mission statement. We put the W in quality. Yes, sound like. Well, some of the so-called real-world mission statements that he listed there, they're interesting because they are about the ways that groups and companies work in reality that they wouldn't want people to know about, that they wouldn't want to publicize. That doesn't mean, however, that mission statements aren't worthwhile. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. If, as the old saying goes, if you don't know where you're going, you probably won't get there. If you travel to some place you've never been, you're probably going to use a map, a GPS, or if you're really brave, you might ask a person how to get there. If God hadn't wanted us to know what we were doing as Christians, he wouldn't have given us the Bible and the good people in it. So consider the mission of the overall church in terms of that saying, forward and outward together. This month we started with connecting communion with building, how coming together with God and one another connects with what we build, coming out of a time of communing, communion not just in the sense of the bread and the cup, though that's very important, but communing with God and one another, and coming out of that, building better lives, building better people, building better communities, even helping to build a better world. We then looked at forward, outward, and together, one at a time. This morning, as we look at how forward and outward together connect, let's start by learning from the ancient past. God called Abram. It's better to look at it as God called Abram because he wasn't Abraham yet when God called him. He would become Abraham when God named him that after he became faithful to God's call. God called Abram to go forward. The land of Canaan might not have seemed like a step forward to Abram, but God knew that it was a step forward. Abram had to move out from where he lived, going outward to answer God's call. God did not call Abram to leave his family and do this alone. The family was to travel there together. So that's the together part. The stories in the following chapters of Genesis show how important Sarai, later named Sarah, and the rest of the family were in achieving what God wanted. As Abraham went on this journey, he didn't get everything right. He made mistakes, sometimes even moral mistakes, but he tried to be faithful and he didn't give up. He kept on the journey. We can learn a lot from that. We can learn a lot from the Old Testament in general because the people there are flawed like us, but the good ones try to remain faithful to God and God's desires. Notice in the verses that after God said to Abram, to your descendants I will give this land, Abram, verse 7, built an altar there to God. Abram realized something we can all remember, that worshiping God is central to doing God's will. If we forget to worship God, then we're not going to get the forward and outward together part right. Some of you may have seen the cartoon where a person is looking at a church's Sunday schedule. All the church's meetings and self-help groups are listed on the Sunday schedule. Someone asked the pastor, when is the worship service? And the pastor answered, we couldn't fit it in the schedule anywhere. Well, that's a joke, or at least we hope that's a joke, as Abram building an altar there reminds us that we need to worship God if we want to faithfully respond to God's call for us to live Christian lives. The New Testament reading also ties as one forward and outward together. In the church, we tend to think of the Gospels as the part of the Bible with Jesus and the part of the Bible where Jesus is speaking, and Acts as the disciples going out there without Jesus. In this reading, though, Jesus has not ascended yet, and he's the one speaking. Jesus tells them not to go forward and not to go outward until the Holy Spirit comes. After receiving the Holy Spirit, then they can be Jesus' witnesses, even to the ends of the earth. So to go forward, say you get this new car. You're at the dealership, you get this new car. The car has to have fuel in it if you're going to drive it off. The car has to have a steering wheel in it that works. And almost every car these days has to have, or else it can connect with, GPS, some kind of system to give directions. The Holy Spirit, for those first followers, was like the fuel, the steering wheel, and the GPS all in one. This reminds us that as we try to move forward and outward together as God's people, that God is with us. God has not forsaken us and let us alone for the task to which we're called. God has provided us with everything positive that we have. Maybe you're sometimes in situations where you don't feel that way at all. You don't feel like you have all the resources. Your boss at work tells you to do a task. He or she gives you instructions how to do it, but they aren't very good instructions. They're just very vague, so you don't really have a clue. The boss then leaves for a business trip or vacation with instructions for no one to bother him or her. And you're like, help, what do I do? Where do I go? But we know it's not like that on our Christian mission. God hasn't deserted us. We have prayer, we have the Bible, we have one another, we have the Holy Spirit. We think about how the Holy Spirit gives us God's power, God's comfort, God's guidance. We also have, to help us as Christians, the writings of faithful Christians from over the last more than 2,000 years. Abram was very wealthy for a person of that time, but compared to all the wealth in the world, or even compared to the wealth of kings and queens, Abram didn't have very much. Archaeologists' discoveries seem to indicate that Peter and his family were the wealthiest in their village, but it was a small fishing village, not a city. We have advantages today that Abraham and the first apostles could not have dreamt of. As we look at going forward and outward together, in a strange sort of way, even what looks like a disadvantage may be an advantage. We think about the 50s, even through the 1980s, going to church was the thing to do. Congregations were fat and sassy. Most people in the community, even if they didn't attend regularly, knew some basics about the Bible and Jesus, even if they were of another religion or no religion. Today, the situation is very different from that. It's a lot more like the situation the first disciples faced. There are a lot more people out there who know pretty much nothing about Jesus and the Bible. More fish for our nets, if we could figure out how best to cast those nets, which is tricky and which is different for each community. That takes us back to looking at what is a mission statement. Per the dictionary, a mission statement is a formal summary of the aims and values of a company, organization, or individual. We can think about our aims and values in terms of forward and outward together, based on the readings we've heard from the Bible all this month. Jesus told his followers to go outward in sharing the new wine of the gospel message, taking it forward. And Christ's prayer for the unity of his followers shows that he desired and still does his followers to do this together. Now, a vision statement is different from a mission statement. A vision statement, again, per the dictionary, is a declaration of the organization's objectives. A mission statement is what you do. A vision statement is why you do it. The way congregations have typically done vision statements is, I believe, a mistake. The focus might be on what do you want this congregation to be in 10, 20 years. Well, that might be exciting to the people who are here, to the members, to the regular attendees. It doesn't mean that much to the people who are out there. To the people outside the congregation, as we think about them, we can think in terms of something that would be like a vision statement for a congregation as to what we do, building a better you for this world and the next. I get excited about that. It's hard for me not to sing it in a TV voice. Then it doesn't sound sincere. I would say, building a better you for this world and the next, But sincerely, I think that would be a good vision statement for people because it shows what we can do for them. It's kind of like if your pipes are clogged, you're new to an area and you need a plumber. You look in the yellow pages or you look on the internet. One ad or website says, Ichabod's Plumbing, a family business in the area for over 80 years, started by Jedediah Ichabod when his outhouse imploded. Used to be on Bleecker Street, then it moved to Wincy Street. You're half asleep already and you have water all over your house. Who cares? Another ad or website says, Joe's Plumbing. We can fix your plumbing problems. We are cheap, fast, and effective. Boom, you're calling Joe's. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a family business or being a long-term business in an area, but those aren't the things you put in large print, at the top to try to grab the reader's attention. That's an example from plumbing. But, for years, the church seems to have put the wrong stuff at the top in big letters. So, we could think about a good mission statement, or at least something to remind the people what they're doing would be forward and outward together. A good vision statement, what does the church do? Building a better you for this world and the next. So consider the mission of the larger church in terms of that saying forward and outward together. Yes, we want to honor our heritage. Yes, we want to love one another. And yes, we argue sometimes. But we're called to move forward and outward together. According to God's holy word, that call comes to us from a fellow named Jesus. And that call comes to us as individuals as well as in groups. That call and the faithful response to that call is what has kept the church moving forward through the ages. Our call is to love and serve. Our call is to mission and ministry. And our call is to praise and sing. Please turn together now to our closing hymn, number 158, and let us rise as we sing this together, followed by the benediction.